Some time ago, I made a poll in my community tab asking if you guys would like to see a series generally explaining music, while tying into Sonic. Note that this is not a series for absolute beginners, but for those with knowledge of the basics, like keys and time signature. However, if you know those, that's about all the prerequisite knowledge you'll need, and more complex concepts will be explained as they're introduced. Our first episode will be on Jun Senoue and his composition and arrangement style for Sonic Adventure 2. First, we'll start with some pretext. In Sonic Adventure 2, Canon's Core is a multi-segmented final stage with 4 unique songs spread across 6 sections. Within the game files, these songs are named C-Core 1, 2, 5, and 6. C-Core 1 is used for both Tails and Eggman sections. C-Core 2 is used for Knuckles and Rouge's sections, and C-Core 5 is used for Sonic's first section. C-Core 6 lays for the slide segment at the end. Notice that songs 3 and 4 are missing. It can be assumed that these are missing because Knuckles and Rouge's composition styles wouldn't fit Canon's Core, or that there wasn't enough time to make 2 more songs. Today, we'll be making a track specifically for Eggman's portion of the stage, and maybe we'll make songs for the remaining 2 characters at some point in the future. Before we get started, we need to establish the instruments we're going to use. To begin, let's recreate the most important part of Senoue's music in SA2, his guitar tone. Senoue is a fan of Line 6's Pod products, and in the year 2000, he bought a Line 6 Pod Pro, which he first used in this game to great effect. Thanks to Joshua Taipoli, who you may know as the creator of the music channel Ongaku Concept, we managed to replicate Senoue's guitar tone. He recorded the DIs of himself playing the intro to Live and Learn, and sent them to a friend of his, who recorded it through his pod. Through this, we know that the preset used was tone 5B. After learning this information, I bought a Pod 2.0, which is just a Pod Pro in a different form factor. I've linked an impulse response in the description if you want to use this tone without having a pod yourself. Use the Emissary VST to get a basic distortion tone, and then load the impulse response with NAD IR by Ignite Amps. Both of these plugins are completely free. Senoue usually uses his ESP Koa Maple for his rhythm guitar in SA2, but I only have a Fender Squier Strat, so I have to do some additional mixing to match his tone. I'm going to break down the creation of the multi-tracks linked in the description if you'd like to inspect parts of the song in depth. We'll be writing in A Dorian, which is A minor with a sharpened 6th, as it's not too happy but also not too dire. Perfect for a song that's supposed to emphasize that you're on a mission to save the planet and there's no time to lose. Our key lesson for today is Senoue's use of chromatic dissension, or otherwise musical motion in a downward sense. Beginning with the intro, we'll start with overdubs that imply the main chord progression, but don't fully show it off yet. Senoue does this in a few songs in the soundtrack. We'll be utilizing a chromatic walkdown a few times in this track, but to put into place that it'll be reoccurring, the first instance will be right at the start. This is echoing what Final Rush does in its intro. An important thing to note here is that when overdubbing your guitars, do not cut them off at the bar line. Let them overlap as is congruent with SA2's style. On our lead guitar tracks, we have another walkdown, this time from an octave above. Before transitioning to the verse, our guitars will go through the pod's flanger effect, used in tracks near the end of the game. If you have a pod, be sure to use flanger 1 and turn the effect level to 10, as it's the exact effect that Senoue used. Try to match the position of the flanger effects between your double tracks to keep them cohesive. In his music, he heavily utilizes the fact that power chords only contain the root, fifth, and octave to stack chords on the left and right to make a fuller sound. We will utilize this for our song. In the first half, the left side will be playing an A power chord to a C to a D. On the right side, I play an A going down to a G and then to an F sharp. Finally, the left and right sides converge on the fourth bar to set up the next section. I play a power chord melody which is interrupted by an overdub, and then the chromatic walk down from the intro going through an EQ to make it sound like a radio. This is used in cooperation, so I've added it here to increase cohesion between the music for the different areas. In total, the verse is similar to, but not exactly the same as cooperation, which makes sense as it comes before cooperation and leads you into its main ideas without spoiling. Next, we repeat the bass of this pattern, but approach our ending G power chord from above instead of below, which is crucial to make the song sound like it's going somewhere, even though we're mostly retreading the same ground. Finally, we take the ending chord progression from Canon's Core 1, and play it in our new key before ending with the left and right back and forth of our chromatic descent. This is a direct reference to Live and Learn. Next are his supplementary instruments, namely synthesizers. For this game, Senoue used a Korg 01W, Korg Trinity, Gem S2 for melodic instruments, and a Alesis DM5, along with various sample libraries through his Akai CD3000 for programmed drums. Regarding the CD3000, Senoue used the sample CDs Best Service Sound Cube Volume 1 and East West Dance Industrial, the latter of which was bundled with the sampler. A minor portion of patches from the 01W can be found originating in the M1, and some Trinity instruments were carried over to the Korg Trident released 5 years later. However, the Gem S2 currently has no software emulation, so I've included a small amount of patches that I've sampled from my S2 and I've linked in the description. Now we can begin with our leads, which are pretty simple as our melodies were set in the previous area. In the intro, Spectrum lead plays our 3/4 note pattern, which is a reference to Weapons Bed. Another lead patch transitions us into the verse with a chromatic walk-up. For our main lead, I'm using the Korg Prophecy, which was implemented into the Korg Trinity Plus as the solo triad, which we know Senoue used. This particular preset isn't on the Trinity's version, but it could theoretically be created as a custom patch. Therefore, we're still within the limitations of what Senoue could have done. The patch, Planet of Funk, plays a version of the synth line from our intro during section B to contrast with the guitar. To serve as a transition between sections A and B of the verse, I've added another lead, which copies the chromatic descent of the lead guitar from the intro. This patch is called Espresso Lead, which is used in a few other tracks in the game as well. This is repeated, with the only change being the second part of the melody being played on the prophecy, and espresso lead being switched out for the lead guitar playing the same line. Also notice how the lead rhythm guitar and Planet of Funk switch panning positions to keep ample differences between both halves of the verse. As a general rule, you should be able to tell what section of the song you're in, even if you're placed at a random point within the song. For the chorus, the prophecy again plays the main lead, with a square wave lead playing harmonies until the part before the loop. Afterwards, the left lead falls through the notes of chromatically descending power chords. This is shifted downwards by a fifth on the right side. Senoue does this in a few tracks, namely Crazy Gadget, and the intro to Sonic Adventure 2 Battle. In addition, the gem S2 backs this chord progression up with stabs on the offbeat. There are three types of bass that Senoue uses throughout SA2. First is live bass, performed by Takeshi Tanida. Second is synth bass. And third is a custom bass library that he recorded himself on his bass. We'll be using the second, playing our bass line on the patch Fat Synth Bass from the Trinity. Something to note is that this patch is stereo, but because we have a lot of bass from our rhythm guitar and our side channels, we'll be making a mono so as to not muddy the track. In the intro, we'll play a basic line that echoes the main melody, before following the chromatic descent of the guitars. In the verse, what we want to especially emphasize is chordal movement. This means we rarely want the bass to be stagnant on one note, and when it moves, it will play multiple parts of the current chord. We won't just be playing the root and the fifth, unless we need to for emphasis. Between sections, we'll use a chromatic ascent and descent respectively to tightly link the two parts. Then, the chorus section will echo the rhythm guitar's progression, before ending off with yet another descent into the loop. To make the chord progression more full, we'll be using two pads to showcase the chord progression to its fullest extent. The first time this progression plays, we'll leave the tail of the chord, but we'll cut it off in the second repeat, so as to not muddy the transition between sections. In the chorus, we'll underline the rhythm guitar with a slightly different progression that especially differs on the last two chords. Instead of directly repeating this progression after the measure, we'll also add some inversions to keep the song feeling like it's moving upwards to a climax. As mentioned previously, Senoue uses Best Service Sound Cube for drum loops, so that's what we'll be using here. I've taken 3 loops from the CD and utilized them in different ways. Loop 3 is the basic layer which will be built on top of, and repeats for most of the track. Loop 1 adds a backbeat for more complex layering, and Loop 2 serves as a fill between sections. As a supplement to this, Megamix Kit from the Trinity provides additional hi-hats and sound effects, and Overdub adds cymbals or reverse cymbals, as well as an 808 cowbell, which Senoue likes to implement. A sound effects patch from the O1W plays a steam sample at the start of most sections, and a collection of toms, which I smashed on my MIDI controller to create, plays in the chorus. Finally, a sound effect from the Gem S2 plays before the loop. For final touch-ups, Senoue likes to vary the intro after the first loop, so we'll cut it in half and bring guitar from the second half into the first. To end the song, we'll loop the chorus once and add a delay and reverb to the rhythm guitar that fades out over time. Not much additional mixing and mastering was done here, besides adding some delay to the leads and cutting mid-frequencies on the master. An important thing to note is that you should master pretty loud, as that's an essential part of SA2's overall tone. Additionally, do not cut out the bass frequencies from the side channels, as Senoue's distorted tone is very heavy on the bass. Here's the final track that we've created when you put all of those composition and arrangement techniques together. And here's a short portion of the song that I modded into Sonic Adventure 2 for an in-game test. Using these elements I point out from Adventure 2's soundtrack, you should be able to create tracks like this to create remixes or original music inspired by one of my favorite Sonic soundtracks. My room has become so humid from my sweat there's condensation on the window.